Right. Bed and Breakfast Association New Zealand, we have Rayma Jenkins.
Part 3, page I-19.
So that we're looking at your stuff, eh?
Okay. We just push that if we're talking.
Yep.
Oh, thank you. I didn't realise you were here. Good morning, and thank you. Oh, sorry.
I mean, just before you start, just say you're aware.
Oh,
10
okay.
minutes is your time,
Yes,
and
thank
if you wish us to ask you questions,
leave the time.
take it as read. We've read your submission, so if you've got anything to add to that, that would be good. Otherwise, just questions, perhaps.
Good morning. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us. On behalf of Hawke's Bay Tourism, we are pleased to support their application or submission for increased funding, Part A and Part B. I'm Rayma Jenkins. I have a bed and breakfast up on Bluff Hill. I've been operating that since the end of 2001. I'm also Vice President of the National Board, the Bed and Breakfast Association of New Zealand, and I also represent bed and breakfasts at the the monthly meeting that Hawke's Bay Tourism holds for the sectors. In that role, I communicate obviously with our own members and also with any other bed and breakfasts whose details I can find on the various websites that people are advertised on. With me is Fiona Rawlings, who is also a bed and breakfast owner. She has Kerry Lodge over in Green Meadows. She is the secretary of our National Association. And Annie has also agreed to sit with us because she knows how nervous we're both feeling, as this is the first time we've been in this situation. I'm going to we know you have read our submission, so we're just going to summarise it, perhaps add a little bit to make it a little more interesting. So I'm going to allow Fiona to start with the statistics.
First of all, I just thought I'd start with letting you know about the Bed and Breakfast Association. We're not hugely well known. We were formed in 1986 and with the aim of creating a national voice amongst bed and breakfast owners and operators around the country. We work for our members by providing them with up-to-date information on relevant areas such as health and safety, ACC levies, and we provide best practice guidelines. To belong to our association, it's not compulsory, but our members must meet minimum quality standards that are set and reassessed. So when they join, their properties are assessed to ensure they meet these standards, and we reassess them every 3 years. The Hawke's Bay Regional Group has been active for about 15 years now and is a subsidiary of the National Association. In total, we undertake our own survey. As I'm sure you understand, the commercial accommodation monitor does not take into account bed and breakfasts or holiday homes. So we run our own survey every year, and we currently believe the bed and breakfast industry in New Zealand is worth more than $48 million in accommodation spend. That's no other type of spend, it's just accommodation. In the Hawke's Bay, we believe that is over $2.5 million. These figures include our members and other bed and breakfasts who we believe are more commercial orientated businesses, not necessarily those businesses who are renting out their back room or their spare room on a one-off basis. In the Hawke's Bay in particular, 73% of our visitors that stay in bed and breakfast are international. 27% are domestic. This is slightly lower than the New Zealand average, which is 76% international visitors. In peak season, however, in the Hawke's Bay, these international guest numbers rise to between 95 to 100% of international visitors alone. We believe the guests that stay in bed and breakfast have a higher disposable income, and therefore they're spending more money than the average tourist in Hawke's Bay. In particular, our guests will eat at nearly every time a winery, such as Mission, Church Road, Craigie Range, Elephant Hill, and they're also taking on tours. So when they come here, they're not just wandering around and looking at the sites, they're actually actively involved in taking tours. Yeah.
Right. We feel that the bed and breakfast industry really supports their local economy with their purchases. I have a small bed and breakfast. I quickly did an estimate. About a third of what I get in as income goes to my local supermarket, and a little note, about $700 spent on eggs alone. Multiply that by 50, that's quite a lot of money into the poultry industry. Our problem is, of course, the short peak season. We do have mostly international visitors, therefore they tend to want to come in the summer. We're very small owner operated in most cases. Just the owner will look after everything with a few services outsourced, like the linen, maybe a cleaner. Hawke's Bay, we feel that Hawke's Bay tourism needs to keep on growing. They need to keep attracting people to the region. We as small businesses can't do that. We do spend a lot on marketing ourselves. We have our own websites. We have advertising and things like the Bed and Breakfast Association, Bed and Breakfast book, which is a well-known internationally almost. We support Hawke's Bay Tourism through the partnership program, provide free accommodation for mills, the trade shows, and of course local publications. We believe that the guests in our industry help support the local economy, and it is therefore vital that Hawke's Bay Tourism is able to continue to promote and grow the numbers of visitors to the region. They have a detailed plan on how they plan to do that. They need more funds to expand their reach with an expanded market spend, so I implore you to increase their budget. Right, any questions, and does Annie want to add?
Questions, Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, thanks for your presentations. I've just got two questions of clarification. You were giving some stats on bed and breakfast. What's the average length of stay? Does it tend to be one night or is it longer than that?
It varies around the country. In the Hawke's Bay, it's approximately 3 to 4 nights. There are a huge number of one-night stays as people come down through the country, come over to the Hawke's Bay for one night and then down. The problem we have with that is they're arriving at mid-afternoon, around 3 o'clock, and they're due to be in Wellington the next day, so they're not seeing anything. We get the odd, in Havelock North, they have longer stays. They would have 4 to 5 night stays. They're mainly domestic visitors.
So you haven't taken your stats and tried to average the length? Because obviously if they stay here a few days, they're going to be spending more money and they're going to be visiting a lot of things. So
Yes.
Yeah.
It really, in the Hawke's Bay, it depends on the actual area. So I do have those, I can calculate those stats, but I haven't brought them with me today.
And,
Yep.
and the other thing I was interested to know was what your occupancy rate is like. Like if Annie is really successful, are we going to run out of bed and breakfasts because they're going to be full all the time?
In February, we are at that limit now. So for the 1 month of February, the majority of bed and breakfasts in Napier City would be sitting at 100% occupancy rate. That, as you head further south to Havelock and those places, they would be sitting at around 90-95%. So that is only for the month of February. January is a weird month. It's busy at the start of January, it's busy at the end of January and empty in the middle of January. March is busy at the beginning of March and probably sitting at 50% for the end of March, April.
And through winter?
Through winter, occupancy sits at about 25-26%.
Okay.
Councillor Balfour.
I would just suspect that most international visitors know where they're going to stay before they set foot in this country. So what do you actually imagine Hawke's Bay Tourism is going to do to increase international visitors to Hawke's Bay?
Well, I know that they do do a lot of marketing through visiting trade shows in, say, China, Japan, England, America. They host a lot of famils from the press publications. The companies that I work with in Britain send out their agents to visit. So we need to promote as much as we can and through those opportunities, but perhaps Annie can add to that.
Yeah, I mean, the international media program's key, but the bed and breakfast, what I would say is that it's a very traditional distribution channel in terms of how B&Bs are booked. So Rayma mentioned working through international wholesalers, and that's how that chain is booked. They brochure us in their brochures, and that is communicated to their various databases offshore, whether it's consumer or to other travel agents. So it still continues in that space.
If I could just add to that, we're out of time.
Very quickly.
Just very quickly, part of the problem with bed and breakfast owners, we're small owner-operated businesses, and if we join together for international advertising, we can only afford to promote bed and breakfast. We need the region to be promoted as a region to attract visitors here before they set foot in New Zealand and get to the Auckland airport.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, ladies, for your presentation and your submission, and we will be back to you in due course. Our next submitter is Meg Bremner, on a similar subject, I suspect. So. Good morning.
Great.
So I'll explain how it works. Mrs. Bremner, good morning, welcome. 10 minutes. I don't know how much of the last presentation you saw. Take your submission as read, but there are lots of questions that councillors have in regard to tourism, so if I could offer you that hint. There is plenty of questions that remain unanswered or weren't asked yesterday. So 10 minutes, and that's your total time. Okay.
Yes, I'm not going to read my submission. I just wanted to summarise the three really key points that we have, and thanks for the opportunity to present to you. The first one is the seasonal aspect of the campaign that Hawke's Bay Tourism have come up with in terms of getting additional funding. The marketing and promotional campaign will take it across the whole year and use activities and events that are already happening in Hawke's Bay, the olive season, the Blossom Festival, the Spring Racing Carnival, to try and attract more visitors at that time, but also to create new events. And we've seen the success of the Fork events, both summer and especially now in winter, to create business for the retailers, restaurants, cafes, creating more jobs during those winter and shoulder seasons. The other point is the amount of the $12 per ratepayer. I didn't realise in a comparison with Taupo, Rotorua, how much more they're paying, and I've used them as examples as being nearby tourism towns and close neighbours. And Wellington pays even more. I know that they're a city though. And if Hawke's Bay is to get the share of Tourism New Zealand's projected tourism growth, Hawke's Bay Tourism need to be given more assistance in order to do that. New Zealand Tourism New Zealand rather, is out there really promoting New Zealand. And there was a question in the last speakers about what Hawke's Bay Tourism is going to do to grow that international business, and that's most of the business that we get is a higher end luxury lodge. Our room rate is around $1,000 a night in the summer. Hawke's Bay has to be put on the map for visitors who are considering New Zealand as a destination. They look at New Zealand and they go, okay, well, where are we going to go? So Annie and her team have got to have the opportunity to promote to the inbound wholesalers in Auckland and around the country that are putting together these itineraries for these travellers, because they don't know where in New Zealand to go. But Annie's got to have the opportunity to make sure that the various international wholesalers are considering Hawke's Bay And the third point was about savings that must be able to be made by coordinating, as we said, our tourism assets and messages, rather than overlapping across. I believe there are 10 plus different websites that people can look at when they're Googling Hawke's Bay. And if they were able to be looking perhaps at a more unified and single message, there must be savings and people must be more able to find their way around what's on, what to do, how to get to Hawke's Bay. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Councillor Scott, question.
Thank you very much, Ms Bremner, and I see your place is for sale, but
Yes, it
I think
is,
it
but
might be beyond me too.
we're
But-
hoping to we're hoping to sell as a going concern.
Yeah.
So we feel, our owners feel very strongly about being able to retain Glen Aros as a tourism asset to Hawke's Bay.
No question, actually, I would have thrown at the previous speakers, but we ran out of time, so you're in the hot seat.
Okay.
How do we get the industry to fully step up to the mark? If we're asking ratepayers to put a lot more funding, how do we, and I know, and we've heard a lot of them are partner members, but for those that we can't catch on the targeted rate for commercial, but are benefiting, how do we get to them?
Well, I think that if Hawke's Bay was busier and more successful, they would get on board with us.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Hewitt.
Question for either of you, and look, in supporting this submission, you're throwing us a huge challenge because you're continually coming and telling us all the good things about it, and Annie, are perhaps more directed at you, but you've landed a problem in our laps, and that's a huge rate increase. So how we deal with that? We haven't seen any answers to that in your submission. So can you spin the story? How do we tell it on to be selling it a little bit more widely in the region with a significant rate increase that is disproportionate in our economic development spend?
Well, I mean, it's interesting when we look at the response from the general public around the increase, and when you look at it in dollar terms, it isn't that substantial. And I know it obviously a percentage increase looks fairly ugly when you've got to sell that into your ratepayers. I guess, and I can only endorse comments made by people like Tony Alexander and others that actually tourism is on a hell of an upswing. And so for a region that is looking for opportunity, tourism provides a hell of an opportunity in terms of growth and economic prosperity. And at the end of that is jobs. So I think we've got to look realistically at what it can deliver and look at the other industries that we are heavily invested in and look at those hard questions and say, well, are they going to deliver what we're expecting tourism to deliver as well? I think it's really important that tourism's not the number one game in Hawke's Bay, but when you look at the opportunity for $1 billion per annum in terms of revenue, that's a sizable chunk of money that every other region in New Zealand's fighting for. And it seems that I don't want to use the term no-brainer, but it seems like a very logical way for us to diversify as a region and look at what our other opportunities are. And tourism certainly is one for growth. And let's capture the upswing. Let's get in.
If I could just add something, feedback from the international wholesalers, that Hawke's Bay is really starting to get onto that map that I mentioned before and be viewed as to be included in itineraries. The work that Annie and the team have been doing has certainly jumped up in terms of the focus for Hawke's Bay in the past few years when we'd sort of gone off the map a bit. So, and international wholesalers have been talking to me about what a shame our property is on the market because the Hawke's Bay is really, really starting to buzz and we're going places, so we want to get a share of the action.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Scott.
Might be able to address, put you in the hot spot.
No, that's
Those
fine.
that are not captured on the commercial targeted rate, but benefit people who
It is a global question, and it's not for want of asking at many levels and forums. But many districts, regions, cities have different rating scenarios. But generally, the world over, a local government or council or central government fund tourism promotion in some capacity. And that's mainly because of the nature of the industry. There are a lot of small operators and they can't afford to do it on their own. We've talked bed taxes before. Bed taxes don't pick up everyone. If we start putting taxes on cruise passengers, you'll soon find cruise companies taking Napier out of the equation and sending them straight to Wellington. And I'd be very cautious about us developing our own levy or tax strategy when other regions in New Zealand aren't doing it, because I think it would seriously put us at a disadvantage. I would say, though, that visitors are quite used to paying. I mean, you all travel overseas, I'm sure, and you know when you look at your bill and you see what bed taxes and provisional taxes are plonked on hotel rates in New York or wherever. And so international visitors are very used to that. It's whether our domestic market, which makes up a very large chunk of our numbers, could cope with that. Queenstown's probably the closest district to looking at a commercial tax, but everyone in Queenstown benefits from tourism. It's a slightly different setup. They don't have other industries like we do. So I don't think there's a silver bullet in terms of trying to fund this. The industry, we know, has stepped up and do contribute, at least $500,000 into our own, the work we do, and that doesn't include the marketing effort that they all pay on top. So there is a substantial amount of money being generated to promote tourism outside of what we do as well.
If I can interrupt you because you're running out of time.
Sorry, Rex.
So, if the numbers are right, it's a no-brainer. But we just had Business Hawke's Bay and some of the economists in there, and I don't know whether you've talked to the Ice House people, challenging the numbers. And so, that's what it's all going to be about in the end. Well, that's what these councillors, if they can go out and we can all go out and sell something that the numbers stack up, but if we have people in the community challenging the numbers, and I just want you to get that right. No,
I appreciate that, and I did hear the tail end of Business Hawke's Bay, and I guess Chris Roberts talked yesterday about the 5% annual, the average has come from some very smart minds and that run the tourism industry. And as he mentioned yesterday, NZIER have backed that up with their own government forecast at 5.8% for international. So we're not plucking these numbers out of the sky. They've actually been determined by some fairly sound minds and taken a huge amount of data to determine those figures. And what the data that he mentioned yesterday, that actually really helps us to support our case for that 5% annual growth. So I think we're very comfortable with the numbers, and it's been stress tested by a lot of people. I mean, from a Prime Minister as our Tourism Minister down, he has, been a part of this process and building that framework.
So
Just out of time, sorry. But there are other opportunities throughout the day. Thank you very much, Mrs. Bremner.